What if you could take that risk, make that change, reach that goal, live your best life? Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast, where we get together with amazing experts and everyday people who share challenges, encourage healing, and explore the possibilities that life has to offer. I'm your host, Gary Scott, and I'm excited that you're along for the ride. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast. And today, my epic guest is Meridith Alexander. Hello, Meridith.
Ooh, I'm so glad to be here. And I'm so glad to have you joining us out there, right? Because we know you're out there.
We know you're out there. Don't be shy, because this episode's going to be epic. So get ready. Put your
Yeah.
boots on.
Yes. Yeah.
Even if they're cute little dancing boots, we don't care. We don't care what kind of boots. Just get ready. So, um, Meredith, I'm going to read your bio real quick so everyone knows who we're playing with, and we're going
Sure.
to jump in the pool. So, guys, we have Meredith Alexander is a best-selling author, powerhouse, momtrepreneur, and top female motivational speaker who's become known for inspiring high-level professionals and entrepreneurs to venture beyond the place where the beliefs stop them. All thanks to a plummeting boulder that changed her old normal into the destiny that she embraces today. Meredith challenges you to explore the boundaries and endless possibilities, positive expectations, and deliberate creation. With remarkable life and death challenges that were laid firmly at her feet, Meredith learned that it's these tiny individual seeds of greatness that live waiting to be cultivated within our own minds. Then, as we master our own mindset and discover the real beauty within our own story, we become free to empower others and to go on to create impossible things. I'm
Woo-hoo!
possible. Yay, I'm
Yes.
possible.
Woo.
I love it. I don't know who this Meredith chick is, but she sounds pretty awesome.
I think the word is supposed to be epic, right? No.
She is epic. I'm
Thank
gonna wear
you.
out that epic line. So, Meredith, I'm excited to jump into this. We've got so much to cover. I've got a little story about boulders too, nothing like yours. But before we get started, I do have my one question, which I
Mhm.
have to ask all my guests for the What If You Could podcast. So, Meredith, um, what is your what if you could?
Ooh, for me, the big what if I could is what if I could help limitless number of people, and this is a woo woo alert coming up here because this is very aspirational, right? But if I could help limitless number of people in existing generations, future generations, to fall in love with the art of being fully alive. That means that sometimes the dance is going to take your breath away, and at other moments, the dance is going to knock the wind out of you. However, both dance partners are required in the choreography, and I believe that we have one goal and one goal only, and that is to be taking our last breath, whenever that is, saying, "Oh my gosh, this was freaking epic. I hope I get the chance to do this again sometime." So that is my wish. That is my driving mission. That is why I wake up exhilarated in the morning and why I love what I what I do.
Ah, that's such an epic what if you could. I love it. I love every minute of that. You touched on a number of different things within that I want to jump on, but I guess the first one is how many people is a limitless number? What are
Ooh.
we looking for? A billion, 2 billion? I mean, 4 billion people have a cell phone.
So here's the thing. The beautiful thing is that when I impact you or inspire you, then it sets off a a ripple effect that can become a tsunami effect, can't it? So long after my physical body is not here, I can still be making an impact, and each of us can. So when I say limitless, it really embraces the what if. I mean, there are things, there are musical compositions that were written hundreds of thousands of years ago. There are books that were written thousands of years ago that were still near and dear, holding to our hearts. There are beliefs that probably started thousands of years ago that we still live by. So we as humanity, at least from where I sit, have the potential to be limitless. And who knows over the next 1,000 years what we will be capable of achieving. But I believe that we have to be more proactive in achieving it, not just live life on autopilot.
God, don't we live life on autopilot? It's just amazing how we do that. But that's by you're planting your little tiny individual seeds in everybody and watch them grow. I mean, you're right about that. I mean, one of my favorite books up there is Thoughts by Marcus Aurelius. And when did he write those? 2,500 years ago, 2,000
Yes,
years ago?
yes, yes.
Right? And
And
there's still are epic today. I mean, you read something he says, you go, "Holy crap, how do you think of that 2,000 years ago?" You
yes,
know?
yes. And I think that that's one of the kind of magical things is that we have been wrestling with the question of how to choose to live for thousands and thousands of years, and we're still trying to figure it out.
And technology was supposed to make it better, right? We were supposed to get more free time, less stress,
Uh,
things were automated. Technology was supposed to make it better. However, as we've all discovered during this crash and burn mission, technology has not made it better. It's people, it's humans, it's you and I. It's Meredith planting that seed in everybody that makes
yes.
us better.
Yes, and I think we haven't learned how to harmonize with the technology yet. I think that's a big challenge because it's hard enough learning how to harmonize with each other, our fellow human being, and all of the variations and different flavors that we show up in.
Well, I'll tell you, the other thing I wanted to touch on is art of being fully alive. I love that line. I wrote it down. I'm going to use it. I'm stealing it, but I'm crediting you every time I use it. Because I love pilot. I mean, let's face it. And I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, dude, you're 32 and my other son's 30. My daughter-in-law is 35. And I say, you are going to wake up and be 50 years old. So you're going to go to bed one day and wake up 50. So if you don't live intentionally every day, you're going to look back and go, what the heck happened? Right? I mean,
Yes,
especially with the speed of life right now, the speed of life is insane.
yes, 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 absolutely. And as you can imagine, um, our story, when I say our, I mean my daughter and my story, put a huge exclamation point on the end of that sentence, because we may be in the middle of our day one day and never have the chance to wake up and be 50, right? Our life, there's no guarantee to length at all. So, how do you live a full and vibrant life, no matter how long chronologically that ends up being? That kind of, to your point, becomes a question. And so, therefore, the fixation we often have with our past, and especially feeling like we have to go back and correct something, makes us miss our current moment And the reality is, our past can give us a lot of data, but we have never lived this moment right here, right now. So it might be different. It can be different. It will be different if we choose to make it different, right?
Yeah, yeah. My first wife only made it to 46. So yeah, cancer took her at 46. So yeah, a lot of people don't make it to 50. And when I hear people complain about being old, I said, that's a gift. You're lucky you got there, but don't stop wasting every minute whining about
Yeah.
getting old and start using it. But so I want to get into your story real quick because when I first read your blurb, I saw the word boulder. And when my wife passed away, I was a complete disaster and made a bunch of stupid mistakes. And I go, dude, you gotta turn this stuff around, right? This isn't who you are as a person. So I got a huge one of those sticky notes that you could, they're like a bolt,
Yeah.
right? And I wrote down boulders in my river. And I wrote down all
Mm.
the things that are blocking the flow in my life. What are all these things that are blocking the flow, right? Like I got to keep picking up these boulders out of the river and move it so that I can get the flow back. And I sent it to a friend of mine. So for the last time years, she says, "So asshole, how are the boulders in your river? What are you going? You still got boulders in your river?" I'm like,
Yes.
"Stop it." However, your boulder story is not like my boulder story. Your boulder
Yes.
story is a life-changing event. Do you want to share with us a little bit of
A-
that for folks who maybe
Absolutely.
don't? Yeah.
Absolutely. Because it has been such a profound teacher for us. To me, even the word boulder itself holds a clue because if you take the you out of the word boulder, in other words, when you get out of your own way, then and only then can you unleash that bolder version of yourself, right? And so for us, our story looked like this boulder had come as a profound lesson in how to face death. And what we ended up discovering was that it was actually a profound lesson in how to choose to live. So for me and for my daughter, um, the scenario was here I was going through life as a single mom, entrepreneur. My youngest, Schuyler, had just graduated from Yale. So all three of my kids were doing fantastically. Schuyler had been accepted into one of the Yale fellowship programs post grad. So she headed to South America to work with the indigenous population. Now, this is a young woman who, by the age of 22, had been to 5 out of the 7 continents. She had taught English to monks in Nepal. She had been to Tanzania. She had helped to build a school. And so this was a young woman who
Wow.
definitely was focused on making a positive impact on the world. Um, and so on this particular Friday afternoon in 2016, right in the middle of my busy season, as I was starting to get to a place in my life where I thought, I have done everything that I can for my children, for my business, for so much of my life. Wouldn't it be nice if I can finally figure out who I am now at this point in my life and start moving that forward? I finally can breathe again and not make every decision from the perspective of mom, right? Or business owner. And so on this particular Friday afternoon, the phone rang and this voice on the other side of the line said, I don't know how to tell you, but there's been a terrible accident. This boulder that had been attached to the side of a mountain for probably millions of years, Gary, chose that moment when my little Schuyler was in the water beneath it to break loose and fall on her. And four of her many, many, many injuries were virtually always fatal. So the call that I got was backed up by medical precedent that basically I needed to rush down there in the hopes that I would be able to say a final goodbye. But I needed to wrap my head around the fact that this young woman that I had just communicated with the night before was going to be no more. And so that, as you can imagine, released a deluge of negative emotions. However, the amazing thing, and this is where I have learned to have a profound awe for the magic of life. It did not happen in Tampa, Florida, where we're based. It happened in Colombia, South America. So that meant that I had to get on a plane and I had to spend hours and hours alone with my thoughts. And I had to figure out what the heck I was going to make this mean. And most importantly, who I was going to show up being for my daughter. And ironically enough, this was not my first boulder in my life. This was the first literal boulder that had struck. But like you, I had had many boulders that I thought would destroy me. And I cried so many tears. I shared so many thoughts in pirate tongue, like a language that would make a parrot blush. I mean, bad stuff, right? However, what it made me do is break away from the normal patterns and thoughts and questions that I had been asking and following. And it made me look a little bit deeper, which ultimately had led me to a place where I thought something has to change. Like you said, this, I do not want to go through my life defining myself as a woman who survived an abusive relationship. This is not who I am. So how do other human beings go out there and face these insurmountable challenges, and rather than having it break them, it breaks through the things that have been holding them back and they emerge as this bigger, pun intended, bolder version of themselves. So as I sat there on that plane, asking myself, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? How much power am I going to give this boulder? Right? I finally landed on the place that there were zero things in the outer game that I could control. Zero. I could not undo the boulder. One of my great marketing branding hacks was not going to solve this problem. Certainly couldn't perform neurosurgery on my daughter. The only thing that I had any control of over was my own inner game and the thoughts that I allowed to have traction. And because every single thought defined how I would respond emotionally, and my emotional state would dictate who I would show up being and whether I would be part of the solution or just amplify the problem, right? So I began asking myself, even on that plane, questions that would elevate me and help me show up as being what I call the epic version of ourselves: empowered, purpose driven, innovative, collaborative. How could I be the mom that I wasn't sure I was capable of being for my daughter? Because as I could see it, based on medical precedent, our only prayer was really a miracle at this point. So, first three questions, what can I control? I had answered that, my inner game. Second question, what can my mind believe? This was not a time to try to look on the bright side, because when you're trying to look on the bright side, where are you really focused? The dark side, right? So my mind had to believe it for me to authentically show up being it. So I had to think thoughts that pushed me in that direction, that energized me, right? And the third question was the most aha for me, and it is, what might I be assuming that is not necessarily true? And the big assumption in the room was that just because medical precedent said your daughter's not surviving, then it must be true. So if I approach this as if my daughter's demise is a done deal, chances are it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So how could I get my mind to believe that a miracle was possible? Well, it meant asking some questions that my mind could say yes to, tiny questions. I just had to find one thought that felt a little bit better. So where did I start? Well, I knew if I started with myself, my mind in its current state would go, yeah, right. Sure thing, baby. Nice try. Right. So I had to think about other people. So I thought, okay, has anyone else throughout time and history ever experienced something or created something, witnessed something that everyone else said was impossible? Well, in that moment, flying through the sky at 30,000 feet in a glorified tin can, that answer became laughable. And clearly, my mind couldn't help but notice life's sense of humor in that moment and say, okay, yes, I'll give you that. Yes, yes, impossible things are happening all the time, right? All the time. So then it became, okay, have medical miracles ever happened? And of course, again, Hollywood is filled with examples of medical mystery, miracles, right? And so, um, again, I had another yes. So I inched my way, finding whatever yes questions I could so that my mind could start to hope and then have a little bit of belief and then ultimately get to a place of knowing that felt as if life would have to conform to our vision. And I think that's what that feeling is, what people refer to when they say faith. And so Gary, I showed up at that teeny tiny little hospital hours and hours and hours and hours later in Colombia, South America, not as the second victim of that boulder, not as the wailing mother, but as someone who was ready to lead Team Schuyler and be a force to be reckoned with that even I didn't recognize.
Team Schuyler. We've got Team Schuyler. So you process this all the way flying down. How long is the flight from Tampa to Columbia?
So funny you should ask that. So we were actually turned away by American Airlines when we got to the Tampa airport, telling them the scenario, even though we had no luggage to check. We had only carry-on luggage. It was my other daughter and myself. My son was there as well. And we said, here's the scenario where we need to fly to Columbia. There's a flight that leaves from Miami in the middle of the night. This is the last flight out of Tampa that we can take in order to get there. And the sweet young woman and her supervisor behind the ticket counter at American Airlines said, "I'm sorry, that's not our policy and that's not our problem." Needless to say, my son exploded at that moment. Um, However, minutes later, we were back in the car and we drove to Miami. So we had that entire car drive, which is about 4.5, 5 hours. And then we had a flight in the middle of the night to Bogota, Colombia. From there, we had a layover to take us to another really intriguing airport that feels like you're landing in the middle of the clouds, called Bucaramanga, which then allowed us to get in a car, in a vehicle, and drive another 4 hours to get to the hospital that had had an ICU, because most hospitals in Colombia do not have an ICU, where Schuyler was being tended to. So, doing the math, it was a significant amount of time. It was literally, it felt like half, maybe 12 hours, start to finish, to get there. Um, and when we got there, it was startling because the building is not at all like the American hospitals that we see, to put it mildly. It looked like a small elementary school. Um, and the ICU had no individual rooms, just basically curtains in between the patients surrounding the nurse's desk in the middle of that room. So it was a symphony of beeps and booms and all kinds of strange noises. So it was amazing.
So it's not just the call, which is shocking enough. I mean, anyone who's received a call like that knows or got a diagnosis of something, knows that initial feeling, right? And so a lot of time it's lockdown because it's such disbelief, it's such shock of like, it takes a moment to get your grounding. So
Absolutely.
you, so then you get the car ride, which is nice. And I'm surprised at American Airlines because normally the airlines are very good about taking a scenario like that and helping you with that. But in any case, so then you have this long drive to Miami, and I know you weren't going to get a direct flight to this little area where your daughter was. I knew that was going to be
Right.
impossible. So how are you strategizing all this on the
So
fly?
again, part of this is again the magic of life, of what, you know, uh, uh, this whole scenario came to reveal. Um, yes, to your statement about shock, I felt like I split into two variations of myself. There was one that was emotionally experiencing this, and the other that was trying to observe and strategize, look at a big picture of this. And I don't know whether it was the shocked version that felt like, oh my gosh, why did my daughter end up with me? I don't even speak Spanish in a scenario like this. How can I help my daughter? But whatever it was, I kind of, zombie mode, uh, went onto Facebook. And this is a woman who, prior to this, posted on Facebook only about doggy adoptions and chocolate. That was it. So I went on there, realizing I was way out of my depth, and said, here's the scenario. I've just gotten a call that my youngest child has literally been, um, in a terrible accident in Colombia, South America. Does anyone have experience with these kind of things? And that, ironically enough, is where my Sky is the Limit book starts, is with that post, because that book captures all the posts, real time,
Wow.
unedited, for the first 4 months. And so what happened was that instantly people began to reach out to me. My phone began to ring off its hook. And it's a scenario of I don't know anyone, but I know this person who's from Colombia. This person has someone in the medical field in Colombia. Boom, 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 boom. So it was like one of those graphics that you see with all the, the spider webs going all across the planet, right? And so one of those connections, the father of one of Schuyler's good friends, um, knew someone who had someone in the medical profession in Colombia. There's no HIPAA there. So this woman, not knowing us, dropped everything, reached out, and was able to sleuth and figure out where Schuyler was and get copies of the X-ray. And really, she became like a sister to me. And so so many people were saying, we'll help, we'll help, we'll help, let us, I mean, and of course she was Colombian, so she spoke Spanish. She became our interpreter, right? Because the doctors and team, most people did not speak English, and Schuyler spoke Spanish, but that wasn't going to help us. She was in a coma, you know. So one of the big beautiful things that came out of this experience was just seeing that one, if you really want to accomplish impossible things, stop believing that you need to do it on your own. In fact, good luck trying to do it on your own,
Yeah.
right? And especially you high achievers out there who feel like somehow it diminishes the shine on your achievement if somebody else helps. Gosh forbid you should ask for help, or guidance, right? And so what we ended up building what we now call our global family.
Mm.
And it were people all around the world who were either sharing our story or contributing to a GoFundMe or trying to give little nuggets of, oh, I can help with this. I can help with this. I can give you this little piece of advice or etc. I've had this experience. And um and so you combine that with my commitment to play the meanest inner game that I had ever played so that I could help my daughter. And I am convinced that if I was trying to play that level of an inner game for myself, ooh, not sure I would have been as successful. But when you're inspired to do this for someone that you feel like you cannot let them down, that epic version of yourself gets unleashed. And that was
Well,
my
you don't mess with Mama Bear. That's for
no.
sure. So Mama Bear is unleashed, and it's interesting. My wife was Colombian. My first wife was Colombian, and her grandfather was a brilliant brain surgeon in um in Colombia, and actually built a hospital, a free hospital. He
Wow.
became wealthy, not because he wanted to. It's just,
Yeah.
you make money as a brain surgeon. So he built a hospital where people could just come. You didn't, that's like, you don't, if you can pay, leave something that'll help someone else. If you can't, don't worry about it. And I don't remember if it was in Bogota or Medellin, but yeah, I was going to ask you because she spoke, perfect Spanish. I was going to ask you if when you got there, did anybody speak English? Because I mean, in a little place like that, you wouldn't anticipate they would.
Yeah, they did. They did not. They did not. I mean, Schuyler had a young woman with her who was going to be her boss on the next leg of her fellowship. So this young woman uh, spoke Spanish and English, which was helpful. And yet this young girl had been with Schuyler. So as you can imagine, she was traumatized. So emotionally to get her realigned to a place where she could breathe was, was challenging, as it would be for all of us, right? And it's interesting that you bring up about your wife's grandfather, did you say? So one of the miracles that happened immediately for us is that the hospital that they found, this tiny hospital, was in a town where the lead professor of neurosurgery from Bogota had decided to retire because there were so many motorcycle accidents, and he thought, you never know when they might need me. And so he was there, part of that original team to do
Mm.
some of the repair. Plus, since they didn't have HIPAA, it happened to coincide with a global neurosurgery conference that was taking place. So they shot her X-rays to this conference and had all sorts of input about what to do, what not to do from some of the best minds. So the doctors who ultimately ended up
Wow.
working on Schuyler in Miami had already seen her X-rays, which is one reason why they accepted her as an international patient to come to complete the process, even though they, technically impossible endeavor, but they agreed for her to come. And what was another kind of interesting little side story is that when my other daughter and I got to Bogota, um, first of all, it was a surreal experience going through customs where they said, "How long are you going to be here?" And I, as you can probably imagine, kind of burst into tears and said, "I have no idea. Here's the scenario." I don't know if I could have gotten away had it been the reverse and I was coming to the US, but um, but they let me through, and then we went to a cash machine where we could convert our money using our credit card, and we could get some Colombian cash out. And so we had probably a total of maybe $400, $500 between us. As it turned out, we didn't need any of it. There was a family that somehow learned about our situation, took us in, even though they didn't speak English, we didn't speak Spanish, took us into their house just down the road from the hospital. So we stayed there. We had no expenses. We finally, the night before, took the 14-member rafting team that had been with Schuyler, that had rescued Schuyler, out to dinner. So we spent a total of the equivalent of about 13 of our own dollars from what we were taking out. But we had everything left. So when it became apparent that we were going to make that drive all the way back to Bucaramanga and be picked up by an air ambulance to fly sea level to get her to Miami, we realized that we had this cash. We could either go through the hassle of at some point changing it back, or we could pay it forward. And so we asked the doctor. We got through this woman who was like my sister, Amalita. She got on the phone with him and said, here's what they'd like to do. Is there a patient who is in jeopardy of basically being booted out of the ICU because they don't have the money to pay, that we could potentially donate these funds to? And ironically enough, the person in the little cubby right next to Schuyler was someone's dad, and they were running out of money. And so the daughter came in the room, and the doctor started talking to her. And at first, she got this horrible look on her face, thinking that he was being discharged. And then my daughter, Saya, was able to give her this money. And what we were told is that that would cover him for months and months and months. And if there was anything left over, it would be paid forward to someone else, but it was outrageous. I think the entire hospital bill, which we had to have paid in full before we could take Schuyler, for her ICU experience in Colombia, ended up being not the equivalent of $9,200. And that's 3 days with all the surgery, all the anesthesia in their ICU. Contrast that with a tiny period of time, like one extra day Schuyler had to stay in rehab that insurance wouldn't cover before she was released, that they billed us $5,000 for. I mean,
No,
amazing.
I stayed 4 days in ICU recently with a cardiac arrest, and I think my my visit there with all the stuff that they did to save me was about $750,000 when I'm still getting bills, but I think so I think it was like $750,000. So yeah, so
Wow.
9,000 is not bad. So I you have to get a helicopter to go from Columbia to Miami at sea level because
So
she can't
actually,
go up because her brain swelling.
yes, it was actually a little executive size airplane so it could hold a United States medical team. Now, Schuyler spent 45 minutes on the hot tarmac with dwindling oxygen as all the equipment, with the exception of some things that were literally embedded in her body, that was Colombian, taken off and having to be replaced by the American team. And you know, no comment, but the 4-hour ambulance ride that we took getting Schuyler to the airport, there was no doctor in the ambulance. So to say that it was nerve-wracking, when we knew that there was a finite supply of oxygen, and they'd already had to unload her at one point during the day because they were worried about the oxygen running out. So, yeah, on the tarmac, the American, tubes and bells and whistles had to be attached to her. And then they had to get her up in this air ambulance, which was a small plane. And yes, exactly to your point, because that's one reason why we didn't consider transferring her to Bogota, because the elevation of Bogota would have caused her brain to swell. So it was a sea level flight all the way to Miami. Um, and she was admitted to the Miami hospital Monday night, and that whole chapter of surviving the unsurvivable was set in place. And so, yes, anyone who's listening, she defied medical precedent. She did survive the unsurvivable, and the posts that I ended up posting on Facebook are captured in there because they reflect the inner game. Because what I realized is that Sky had so many friends and acquaintances all around the globe. And what was happening is they were flooding with, oh my gosh, I can't believe Skylar's not going to make it. And it was all this energy of expecting her to die. And I knew from all the research and training that I had done in the inner game is no, 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 that is setting up the wrong magnetic force field, right? The energy field.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
my obligation was to become the leader of Team Schuyler and divert them to thinking and envisioning more about how strong she was, how amazing she was, and how amazing they were. So we had no pictures of her in the hospital, the usual ones that you see of people up. We did none of that. It was all the real Schuyler in her prime. And it was, if you
Mm.
want to champion us, then you go out there and you live your dreams. You be the best version of yourself. You channel your inner sky. And and so people began to share that, you know, like crazy. And ultimately, it was a fan stopping me on the street, recognizing us, saying, "When are you going to publish those posts into a book?" And I kind of looked at them like, why do you want me to publish them in a book? They're on Facebook. Like, yeah, but time is passing. I want to be able to highlight. I want to be able to. And I thought, huh. So I
Hmm.
went home, designed a cover, added an opening chapter and some closing thought, bang, sent it off. And a few weeks later, it was in print. So
That's amazing. Just that alone is amazing that you can get that out to print. And so that is the sky is the limit. And so everyone needs to go out and get the sky's the limit so you can find out about the story and how that all came about. But I mean, I mean, so that was your breaking of the old normal. That's when you had that hit you and you had to, well, you didn't have to. You chose to take everything into a new direction. Maybe not. I mean, maybe you were
well,
like
yeah,
this
no, no,
before
no.
this.
No, this was, I mean, here's the irony. And some of you who are listening may relate to this. I felt like I had spent my entire life questing for my passion and my purpose, and preferably one that would align with an income source, right? So I could maybe do both simultaneously.
Yeah, income is better than outgo. It
Yes,
just is.
exactly. And I felt like I had failed miserably in that quest, and I had no idea really. I mean, I knew what I loved doing, and it was positively impacting the world, but that was just so woo-woo and fluff that I hadn't really even given it a second thought as a single mom who had bills to pay. I can't take any risk, any chances. I must be doing something that I know will bring money in. So the irony is that when the 4 months that I spent in the ICU in Miami with Schuyler destroyed my business because it had been my busy season, um, in an industry that was seasonal, and I missed it. So when Sky survived, that doesn't mean she was like, okay, where did I leave off? I
No.
was inheriting in full gratitude a 22-year-old young woman who could not speak, could not swallow, could not be left alone at all. The boulder had severely impacted her ability to balance. So at that point, she couldn't even sit up on her own. She would fall. She couldn't lift her arms. Um, I mean, you name it. She needed someone to do everything for her. So even if my business had been alive and thriving, I would have had zero capacity to do both. And so enter boulder number two with this experience, right? Congratulations, you made it through the first challenge in the escape room. And so I had to figure out, what can I do that I mean, clearly she's my first priority. I've never been a caregiver before. I don't know how to do this. Um, and how do I generate income at the same time? And so I won't kid you, there were a lot of moments of financial terror and feeling like this is bigger than I am. I mean, at one point when we first got back to Tampa, we were living in a two-story townhouse. So that meant that I had to physically get Schuyler up to her room. There was no way to set up a room for her downstairs. I had to get her up and down the stairs and into a wheelchair, get the wheelchair up, and I even had a baby monitor in my room when I was sleeping so that at 3 a.m. when she would call me to say I need to go to the bathroom, mom, I knew what it was for. I would go in and wrestle her little body onto the wheelchair, push it into the bathroom, try to get her on the commode, get her off, get her back into bed. I mean, it was physically brutal to say the least, and it was emotionally heart-wrenching to see this young woman who had been so vibrant and independent now
Mm.
just struggling to have enough breath to say two words, much less a sentence. So there was a lot of asking questions at that point of, okay. Um, However, it really emerged that the same inner game that had allowed me to find a version of myself in the hospital could allow me to find a version of myself as caregiver and again, still leader of Team Schuyler, um, even though the future was totally unknown. And it wasn't a matter of being resilient until we returned to normal. It was, what if there is no back to normal, right? What
Mm.
if this
This
is
is the new normal. This is now
correct?
the new normal.
Correct. Correct. So to kind of fast forward, at first I tried to resuscitate the previous business, breathe life into it, and um, sort of successfully a little bit, but it wasn't the kind of business that you can kind of do as a afterthought, right? But then COVID hit, and it was a business that could be completely destroyed by that. But interestingly enough, thanks to that book, The Sky is the Limit, and some of the times that I had been asked to speak, even though I was like, I am not a speaker, um, they people started asking me to coach and share some of the strategies on the inner game. And even in a corporate environment, and I said, I've never been in a corporate environment in my life. And they're like, but yes, you've dealt with change and unpredictability and all this. So, ironically enough, my coaching business started taking off. I started being asked to speak, managed to get beyond my self-definition that I am not a speaker and actually fall in love with, helping to inspire people and helping people find the epic version of their own story, right? Um, and so meanwhile, Schuyler's working and working where we find a place in Orlando where we can go once a month for a few days, and they work specifically on traumatic brain injury, spinal cord injury, which she doesn't have. It's just primarily the brain, um, and stroke. Those are their specialties, but they're not traditional physical therapy, so insurance doesn't cover it. So we were able to
Of
get
course.
donations to help us, and we over the past now this February, it will be 10 years since this happened. And Schuyler still lives with me. because she has no peripheral vision, no long distance vision. It would be dangerous for her to try and live on her own. But life has forced us to become the dynamic duo. And as we moved further and further on this journey, we realized that actually our what if was aligned. And so this all really came to a peak when Sky this year was crowned Miss Wheelchair America. It was the first traumatic brain injury survivor to be crowned, because one of the things that she can't do still that well is she doesn't have spontaneous thought as well as she used to. So to be eloquent, probably not going to happen that much. And she still has a little bit of a speech impediment. But man, there's a reason why happiness literally is her middle name. It's Sachi, which means happiness in Japanese. And so she got this crown, and it's not a beauty pageant, it's a platform for awareness, right? Being an advocate. And so for her, one of the things that felt really important to us is to have people look at the accessibility community not as a bunch of imperfect others, poor damaged beings, right? That we have to be kind, we have to be polite, we have to be compassionate, and maybe help them by giving them VIP parking, that there
Mhm.
are silent disabilities. And oh, by the way, while we're at it, even able-bodied people have things that they believe are their own disabilities. Well, as we thought about it and we were kind of brainstorming a little bit, it struck both of us, you know what, a lot of now I've coached hundreds of, executives, teams, high achievers, and really helped them catapult to places that they thought were impossible. How did we get there? By helping them clean up beliefs and expectations and patterns that they developed as children. What were they assuming that is not necessarily true? Yeah, you know what you bought into when you were 4, 5, 6, and 7? What if it's not true, right? And so from that, that's how we came up with our little children's book series. Now we have 8, and it starts out, you will notice the title of this, Gary. It's The Miracle Princess and the Boulder. So
I
it's
love
kind of
it.
a fairy tale version of what happened to Schuyler, with a bunch of lessons that um, we don't hide our scars. Our scars make us who we are. They cry out that we were stronger than the things that tried to bring us down, right? And that all of us have scars. And that's what gives you your superpower when you lean into it, right? So, what we're doing now, loving, is we're going into schools, we're talking to sponsors about sponsoring books for pediatric hospitals, expanding it. We can even memorialize specific children and add them as new characters in the Magic Valley. So, um, never in a million years would I have guessed that this would become one part of my passion and my purpose. Never in a million years would I have guessed that I would have found that passion and purpose thanks to some stupid boulder falling on my child, and that I would be living this passion and purpose with my daughter, and that we somehow would be able to untangle a lot of the mess and turn it into something that feels more like a blessing and an opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So what does the EPIC stand for again? What's the acronym for the EPIC?
So EPIC is really unleashing that version of yourself or yourself as a leader or your team as empowered, purpose driven, innovative, and collaborative. Those to
Hmm.
me are elements that I feel that when we can really lean into them, that they hold the key to being able to come even more alive, fully alive. When I'm working with my clients, one of the things that we kind of joke around with is replacing the elephants in your room with the elf in the room, ELF. And that means that our kind of secret sauce for unleashing parts of ourselves that maybe we didn't even know existed starts with one of the superpowers that we as a species are given that I think has gone completely under the radar. And I think we're the only species, not being another species, I don't know this for a fact. I am guessing
We
this.
we cannot confirm nor
All right,
deny
or
if
deny
another
this.
species has.
Exactly. But it would be our imagination, our ability to, here's the E, envision that which does not currently exist, right? And typically, most people use that imagination to worry, to fear, to self-doubt. That's what we build that muscle for. And we get very good at that. We
Oh.
imagine how horribly wrong things can go, right? My gosh, a boulder could drop. Oh, wait, that really happened, right? But we have the ability, what the reason I call it a superpower is that when you're willing to credit your imagination for being incredibly valuable, not make fun of it as being woo woo if you go a little too positive, that's unrealistic. Well, if it happens, guess what? It's not unrealistic anymore. Oh, so think about it in times when all the evidence around you is that things are going horribly wrong. The one opportunity you have is to take your imagination and envision what if? What if this is actually leading me toward something else? Has anyone who has that something else ever possibly experienced what I'm experiencing now or felt the way that I feel now? Probably. So if I can build that envisioning muscle, I'm taking advantage of a superpower that we humans have been given. So that's number one. That's the E in ELF. L is the language, the words that we choose, because the words, not just that we share with each other, but the words in our own inner narrative become the programming code. We interact with them all day long. And yet we get to choose which words get traction. And it blows my mind to think that we feel obligated to put virus protection on our technology because bad things might come in and corrupt the system. But we think, oh, wait a minute. I must think this thought. I must figure out why I'm thinking this thought. Let's check. We have no such thing as quarantine or virus protection when it comes to those
And the good news is we're only hammered with 70, 80,000 negative thoughts a day. So we could probably use some virus protection because that's a lot, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's amazing the language we like to beat ourselves up with all day long. It's bizarre. It's a bizarre
absolutely.
phenomenon.
But Gary, what if I were to push back on that a little bit and suggest the possibility that the reason we have so many of those is because that is what we have trained our mind that we come even more alive when we hear So it's just a pattern. It's just a habit. And when we reprogram the code, get the bad code out of there, and at first it'll take a lot of discipline because it doesn't feel like that is who you are. That's just the way I'm wired. Well, you wired it. Wire it differently, right? Fix it. You get a new variation of your phone on a regular basis, upgrade, right? So language is so important. And then the final thing is F, which is focus. What are you going to focus on? And what are you going to choose to make that mean? Because when something happens, it's just something happening. You have a brief second, and this is science. You have a brief second when either you take control of the story and say, okay, this is what I'm going to make this mean right now. Or you're like, okay, subconscious, have at it. Let's just react, right? So that's the elf. And when you can kind of use that as the filter of as you go through, are the thoughts, is the language that I'm choosing right now, is that empowering me? Is that leaning into my purpose? Is that strengthening it, amplifying it? Is it innovative? Is it tapping into the imagination, right? And collaborative. Am I realizing that I am not intended to do this on my own, right? So yeah, that crazy little boulder came with a lesson.
I love Elf. Envision, language, and focus. I love Elf. It's so true. We just had to hit Control Alt Delete on our
Yes,
mind,
yeah,
reset it, and allow it to, you know, going back to the children's book, I freaking love the children's books, what you're doing, because we're all wounded little children, right? I mean, all of us are. I don't care who you are. You've got something that's going to come up from your past and kick you in the butt.
yeah,
So I love the children's. And when we come out into this world after 9 months in this comfy, warm, safe little area and get slapped and we're in this bright lights and everything's kind of like, and we get shocked into this,
yeah.
we don't have a bunch of negative thoughts at that moment. We don't
No,
have a bunch of fear. We don't have a bunch of this depression, and we don't have this history that's going to come back and haunt us. We're just a fresh little creature that can be filled
yes,
with positive and good enforcement. But as time goes on, we allow these recordings to get embedded in our computer, and then we're great at pulling them out. We just keep pulling them out. But you're going to record it, not record us, but recode us.
yeah. Well, that's one of the aspirations of this book series. And to speak to your comment about the inner child, one of my favorite kind of compliments about book number one, that the Miracle Princess and the Boulder, was spoken by an 84-year-old man who said, I didn't read this to any child other than maybe my own inner child, but it's the first children's book that I've ever read that made me get emotional and cry. And he said, and I think that, you might say I'm kind of old at this point, but that part of me was healed. And that's really one of our aspirations. It's remarkable when we have the privilege of being able to go live into some schools. As you can imagine, I mean, I'm all decked up like the wise fairy of the valley and sky as princess happiness and
I've seen it on Facebook. It's actually very entertaining.
absolutely. So we go in there and I wheel Sky in her magic wheelchair and out of the mouth of babes, right? Almost inevitably some child goes, ew, what happened to her eye? Because she's got one eye that's
Yeah.
permanently winking, right? And the kids are all looking at her like, ooh, something's wrong with her. What's wrong? And we, of course, have a little bit of fun and say, hey, would you like to hear the story of how Princess Happiness ended up in her magic wheelchair? And they're, of course, and I tell you, Gary, they are glued to the story. The lessons are there about, again, letting your cracks shine, let the light through and everything, and that your challenges can be your superpowers. And by the end, they are lining up to hug Schuyler. They tell her,
Uh,
gosh, you're so beautiful. I love you. We give them these little pages that they can start to draw their own Magic Valley, and they're showing all their masterpieces. And we teach them to, take this drawing home and keep drawing on it if you want when you're home, but no, put this someplace so that you know that each one of us has our own magic valley within us. And it's a place where we can always go. We will always be safe. We will always be worthy. We will always be loved. We will always be taken care of. And we will always be able to find joy if we can't find it in the world around us, right? And that leans into the whole imagination piece. And I tell you, I heard from a parent that their daughter will not let that piece of paper out of her hand. She takes it with her everywhere. And to your point, at this stage of their life, there's not a lot of cynicism there. This is what they're being told is truth with all capital letters, and it is becoming a foundational part of their programming code. And when you impact them emotionally, it sticks more firmly. It's harder to dislodge. And so we are just absolutely loving it, and which is why we, have published 8 books in the last couple months, because there are all these stories and, you know, so
Well, I'll
we're
tell you, it's so desperately needed because our children are under attack, and they really are. And I don't want to take such a positive comment and make a negative comment, but I do just the awareness of the fact that this is really important for our children,
yes,
because it's a weird time to be young. When a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old has a cell phone and they can go anywhere to all this craziness, right?
yeah,
There's not a lot of positivity out there except your Facebook page. But it really is tough. So to bring children back to the wonder, to bring children
yes,
back to the beliefs, to bring children back to that that joy of knowing that, hey, this is where you can go. You can go
yes,
here. You can live here if you choose. You don't have to be exposed to all that other stuff. I, I,
yes.
I just think it's wonderful. I just think, to quote Whitney Houston, the children are our future, right?
Yes, absolutely, without question. And, each one of us traces back to a child, right? We were children at some point. And so, yes, for us, it's a joy and a gift to be able to do this. We really hope to be able to expand it to the point where we can get in front of as many children as possible and kind of revise the definition of perfection from being this, I don't know, this finite thing to
Whatever we're promoting out there is what the
and what
social media says is supposed to be perfection. Yeah.
yeah, and when everything in life, and life is filled with clues, of course, shows that perfection, true perfection, is actually the ability to adapt and, to use your word, to flow and to learn that, yeah, boulders are what make the river interesting. There would be no whitewater rafting without a few of them in there, right?
Well, the
Yeah.
other part of your book that I love so much, my wife and I were talking about this morning about we were the ultimate latchkey kids of latchkey kids. I don't even think we had a latch or a key, but there certainly wasn't anyone home when we got there. And you know what I love about your book is parents having something they can pick up and read to their children and
Yeah.
live through that together with their kids. Because getting the parents involved and having, like you said, the 84-year-old man who said, "Hey, this really touched me." So
Yes.
if you get to the parents and you're really helping the parents and they want to bring this to their children, maybe that starts opening up conversations that they have
Yes.
never had.
So it's funny you would mention that. If you see, at the end of our stories, we actually have these play pages, where sure, there are things that it's intended to be done with the parent. And there's some things like, how many roses do you see on this page? Count them. But there are also challenges like, have you ever felt as mad as the Boulder King? What can you do the next time you feel mad so that you don't feel so bad? Right? So they're a little bit more mindfulness sort of questions and thoughts in here as well. We try to extend that on the My Friend the Boulder Facebook page, where we, you know, have other things. Ultimately, are going back to the very first question you asked me. Ultimately, we would love to get to a place where we could grow this to a platform with its own algorithm that is positively focused, because it can be done. It depends on the programming. Even the meta programmers and those have said, oh, no, sure, we could do that. It's just that we get a quicker response when you make people angry, because it's such a primitive response, right? We're not
Yeah.
in the business of making higher level human beings. We just want to make money, right?
Just want to make money. It's just like the old nightly news adage when they say, if it bleeds, it leads, right? We don't
Yes.
want to post any good news. We want to tell you about the muggings and the killings and how everything's falling apart. All right, good night, everybody. Have a good night's sleep, right? It's like, who watches the nightly news before they go to bed anymore? That's complete
Right.
madness. But having the ability to maybe we just need to start our own Facebook. Maybe we need to go on to whatever other options
Yeah.
there are. If there are, I have no idea about any of that stuff. But again, I think it starts with the family. It
Yes.
starts with the parents. It starts with giving them a tool because, like we were talking about this morning, we didn't have the best teachers growing up, a lot of us we latchkey kids. Our parents did the best they could, but they just weren't there. And so when we're trying to work with our children, we do the best we can, but there's no manual. So
Right.
as you're giving these tools to parents to read to their children, do the little works in the back, what a wonderful teaching and bonding moment for the children and for the parents.
Yes, and that's as much a part of the mission, and also expanding it even wider is what we're hoping to do, is to again kind of blur the lines of us and they, right? Them being, well, the wheelchair community, or people who think this, or people who look different. There, this whole fixation with compartmentalizing we need to know who the them are, so maybe we have a shot at knowing who we are, instead of saying, wait a minute, it's the variations. One thing that we really emphasize in this book when we're reading it aloud is there's one picture in here that shows the valley with all these different creatures in here. And
Mm.
I asked the kids, what do you see and what are your favorite things in this picture? And everyone has different favorite things. And I stop them at one point and say, do you realize what's happening here? And the kids are like, what?
All
What?
living
I
together.
know. And I say, we all have things that are absolutely our favorite, but it's only when we take all of these favorite things and put them together that the Magic Valley becomes so beautiful, right? And they're kind of, and then we of course show them the metaphor. That's what you're like. Each one of you look different. You have different talents, you have different skills, and you're amazing on your own. However, when you have the opportunity to all be together and play together, think together, imagine things together, that's when you become magical and unstoppable. And the kids are like, yeah, you know. So we're
We can all live together in the Magic
yes,
Valley if we
yes.
choose to. And that's the thing, with children. I love that little meme of a little black kid hugging a little white kid. It says, "Hey, racism, you're not born with it. It's
No,
taught." And a lot of the negative things that we have is taught. It's like politics. I mean, the right wing and the left wing are the same part of one bird. It's like, but we love these divides, like you said. Meta says, "Well, we could do it if we want to, but it doesn't sell, right? I mean, it's not gonna
right.
prove stuff." So the children know it inherently. They know it
Yeah,
inherently. They know who they get along with, who they don't get along with. But it's not such a wicked, me against them thing. It's just
right,
he's got cooties. That's all. It's not a big deal.
right,
But I love that you're showing them that, yeah, all these different things are all in the same valley and they're all coexisting. They're all getting along because they can.
right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just it's so encouraging to think that, again, if we can get some of these ideas, some of these principles, some of these neuro pathways to turn it into science, um, nice and strong, then they'll be a little bit better equipped to kind of push back when other ideas try to push themselves in. And maybe, in spite of ourselves, sometimes we will get to a place where we don't believe that it's normal to be your own worst enemy, for example. It's not normal, right? That's not what you were
It's not.
born to be,
Mm-mm.
right?
Mm-mm.
And you're
Mm-mm.
not being pompous or something when you celebrate your own gifts and you tell yourself, wow, that was pretty freaking awesome, you know?
I tell people all the time, self-care is not selfish. You
Right.
have to, like Jim Rome always said, put your mask on first. You have to take care of yourself,
Yeah.
and then you can start helping others. And it's it's a little bit challenging sometimes when there's so much negativity throwing arrows coming at you, but there's so much good out there. Like Anne
Yes.
Frank says, I do believe people really are good at heart, no matter
Yes.
everything that she had been through and
Yeah.
everything that your daughter's been through and everything that you've been through. Um, you guys are amazing. I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface of the
Wow.
wonderment of Team Schuyler and Meredith Alexander. You've been wonderful. We could go on forever on this, but I'm going to be honoring of your time. Gosh, there's so much that we didn't get to touch on, but I do want to ask you one last question, if I may, and I lied earlier. I said I just had one question, but I'm a liar. I'm a liar. I've got two questions. I give you the first one, but I don't give you the second one. So, my last question before we hasta luego is, if there's a thought or a message or a quote, if there's something that meant a lot, just, to Meredith Alexander that you would love to leave us with before we hasta luego, um, what would that last thought or what would that last message be?
Um, so for me, I think a quote that has been important to me is actually from Abraham Hicks' Law of Attraction. And I like to look at the word attraction as a contraction for the words attracting the right action. So the law of attraction. And the quote is very simple that you cannot get it wrong and you will never get it done per se. And um, so that for me segues into some of my thoughts about the boulder, that it's not in spite of the boulders that we succeed. It's thanks to these boulders in our lives that we discover just how high we can soar. And so the boulders in the river are not there to stop you. They're there to inspire you to maybe consider a slightly different direction.
I love it. You've corrected my boulder in the river story about the boulders needed to be removed because they were blocking my flow, but I just wasn't looking at the boulders in the right way. I was taking the boulders as a negative instead of looking at the boulders of how can I redirect? How can I take my kayak and go over this waterfall, come out of the suck zone, and maneuver through the rest of this river? When they reintroduced, I don't know why this made me think of this, but when they reintroduced the gray wolves back into one of the national parks, I don't remember which one it was, but it changed everything. They thought that bringing the wolves back in would decimate a lot of things, but it didn't. It actually changed everything. The gray wolves were natural predators for things that were actually hurting the environment. So the grass started growing more. The trees started getting more healthy. A lot of the little animals came back, which helped feed the other animals that brought them back. And one of the main things that recovered was the rivers and the streams, and they
Mm,
couldn't figure out why gray wolves would affect the rivers and the streams. Well, the gray wolves ate what was eating all the beavers, and the beavers now flourished and we're now building more dams and helping because beavers are great river
yes.
healers, right? And they started healing all these rivers. So now there's new rivers that haven't flowed for decades that were now flowing again. And all this ecosystem changed because of one thing that they did was reintroducing the gray wolves. And
Yeah.
your ecosystem has completely changed because this tragic incident that happened to your daughter thousands of miles away turned into some sort of bizarre, crazy blessing in a
Yes.
way, which is hard to say because I know your daughter has her challenges. Um, but look at what she's doing for the world. Look at what
Yes.
she's introducing to the world. Look at the gift that Schuyler.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, as I,
I lost my train of thought there for a second.
that's okay. I mean, that's, I think what you're demonstrating is really important is that when emotions well up in us, that's a clue that we're on something that's really important. And that it's almost like when you're playing the hot and cold game and the tears finally flow, that means you've gotten hotter and you've found it.
Yeah. Well, before I become a babbling idiot and a blathering fool, I'm going to get you out of here. So, everybody, we have been very blessed, which is a tiny fraction of who Meredith Alexander is. Her amazing daughter, Schuyler, and Team Schuyler. You've got to find them. So, Meredith, where can we go to find more Meredith, more Schuyler, all the books, all the stuff? Where can people go get and find you?
So, as you probably would imagine, it's more like where can we not find you, right? You won't find us on Substack, but other than that, you can find us on Facebook. The page, if you really want to follow Skylar and my journey, it is Sky is the limit, but it's spelled like her name, Schuy. So Sky is the limit. I do have my own personal Meredith Alexander page. Notice two I's, not two E's. We have a My Friend the Boulder Facebook page. We also have, I'm on LinkedIn. And so you'll see some of my more serious adult sort of professional stuff on LinkedIn. And we have a My Friend the Boulder YouTube channel where, yes, I get very non-adult, put my little butterfly wings on and read the stories out loud. You can't tell that I'm slightly animated when I do that.
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm,
No. Mm-mm.
not at all, right? And then our books are available on Amazon. So you just have to look up the My Friend the Boulder series and you'll see all of our books. And of course, if you're interested in coaching either for you or for your team, that would be my gritmindsetacademy.com website. Or for speaking, it's meredithalexander.com. So,
Wow. Well, we're
now,
gonna we're gonna link all those things on the podcast so people hopefully didn't have to take notes. But God, there's so much we didn't get into. I had questions about the grit. I had more questions about the Epic 100 Days of Epic. But it's just so fascinating. There's so much to you guys. You're doing so much great work. I just love it. You're kind of like people always say, how does some people run all these businesses and do all these things? And it's because they're passionate about it. It's easy. It's not work when you love it as much as you do. And like you said, you come firing out, ready to go. Maybe not every morning. We all have our crappy mornings, but yeah, your passion is there. I love what you guys are doing. Um, I love watching Skylar on Facebook and what you two goofballs are doing together. I think it's wonderful.
yes,
So,
yes, yes.
so
Awesome.
much fun.
Well, we'll have to do it again sometime. You put together some more questions, and if it,
Well, but Skylar has to be there next time.
oh,
So
yeah,
we have to ask, we'll have to ask Skylar there.
absolutely.
Well, so everybody, you've just had a smidge of Meredith Alexander. She has the books 100 Days of Epic. She has The Sky is the Limit. She has the children books, My Friend the Boulder children's books. She does the coaching, the speaking. Um, Makes julienne fries. I mean, it dices, it slices. She just does it all. Meredith, you have been a blessing. This has been beyond fun for me. And of course, until I started crying, and then it became a. But you are wonderful, my dear. I can't wait to see this episode and re-listen to all your goodness. So
Thank
thank you
you
so
so
much. This has
much.
been a real pleasure.
Thank you. I loved it. And thank you for listening and joining us in our conversation. And keep listening to Gary's podcast. As you can tell, they're gems. So thank you for having me, Gary.
And run out and get the books. I am now going to buy every one of the 8 books for my grandchildren
I love
because
it.
I can't wait for them to read the Boulder books. I just think that's a true blessing for this generation, the next generations and generations to follow. So you're the best. Love you.
Thank
Let's
you
do this again.
so
Let's
much.
get Team Schuyler and do it again.
Yes, absolutely. Sounds perfect. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We'll see ya.
Bye.
Thanks again for joining us on another episode of What If You Could podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and give us any feedback. We'd love to hear it. And remember, if you can dream it, you can do it. See you next time.